Assassin's Creed Origins is often touted as the good one of the RPG trilogy, and to be perfectly honest, it's for a good reason, as the game is amazing. That being said, I feel like people frequently overlook many of its flaws. And don't misunderstand me, I'm not saying that the game is bad or that people are wrong to call it great, but I believe that it is important to point out these shortcomings, as it is the title that set the Assassin's Creed franchise on its current path. As the popularity of the up-and-coming series grew and the first installment became more and more appreciated by the gamers, it became a yearly release, with every subsequent game after AC2, and it's not difficult to see why. Ezio was a protagonist beloved by all, and with the wide range of possibilities in historical settings, we all wondered where the series would take us next, with hype building with each little hint and trailer. Year by year, however, it felt like Ubisoft found their niche and were no longer interested in serious innovation between the titles, with very few new additions in each game aside from the setting and the characters. And with fans becoming more and more bored of the repeatable formula, Ubisoft had to return to the drawing board and finally take a gap year in developing their next title, and boy did they deliver. A world larger than we have seen in any previous installment, a new combat system and increased exploration possibilities, a wider range of weapons, a literal eagle vision and many other changes made Origins feel like a breath of much needed fresh air. Please note that I am not going to be talking about the story of the game in general. I enjoyed it and I thought it was engaging, although not without its flaws. If you want a proper deconstruction of the story, please check out Alien Platypus's video titled What Assassin's Creed Origins Failed to Understand. And with that being said, let's delve into Egypt's dunes, starting with our window into the story, Bayek. Now, I genuinely don't think I could imagine a better protagonist for Origins than Bayek, as he really is the beating heart of this title. Ancient Egypt feels more alive because of Bayek's deep connection to it, and through his eyes we experience all of its aspects, the spiritual, emotional and moral fabric of what the Magi were, protectors of the people. A trait of his that I deeply appreciated, and one that I feel is not often talked about, is his devotion to his faith. I don't know about you, but much like ancient Greece, ancient Egypt and their mythology and culture fascinated me as a child, and I would breeze through school history books whenever they talked about it. Bayek's religiousness fills me with the same fervor that he feels when his voice drops to a growl in anger at the sight of bandits blaspheming against Sobek by hunting crocodiles, or takes on an apologetic note when praying for forgiveness for taking treasures out of tombs. You can feel those emotions course through you. His audible grief and regret when talking about his lost son, or his cries of agony as Hemu dies, make you grieve with him. And when he talks to children in the game, you can hear his smile and genuine affection and tenderness seep through his voice. You can feel that same warmth within your own heart. While Assassin's Creed has always had great performances when it comes to their protagonists' voices, I can honestly say that I consider Bayek's the greatest since Ezio. I don't know how much they paid Abubakar Salim, but whatever it was, he deserves so much more. Just take a listen to these few clips showcasing his wide range.
My Sammy, your life is done here in the desert dust. They took my closest friend.
You are not afraid of heights, are you?
Hey, lead on, little one. I will follow.
Where did you learn to climb like that? That looks like fun.
What are you of now?
A new creed. Ours is finished. In the distance, I see my son. When I reach for him, he turns to ashes. Sleep. I never sleep. I just wait in the shadows, and I will kill you all. Everyone who sniffed the air that day in Siwa!
God, that man really brought the acting in voice acting. As you can see, while Bayek's quest stems from grief, it does not define him. Just like anyone, he is a man of immense compassion, kindness, but also anger and regret, and that's what makes him so relatable. He does not focus solely on vengeance, but also helps those in need along the way, and always stands up for the oppressed. I mean, just try taking a boat from an NPC and see how he acts. Instead of shoving the NPC into the water, or the NPC simply jumping in themselves like they did in older games, he kindly asks to borrow it, and directs them to sit on the other side of the boat and travel with you. It's such a small detail, and maybe I'm weird for honing in on that, but it's something that I genuinely notice and appreciate it each and every time. Any open world game lives and dies by, as the name suggests, the world. This may seem obvious, but it's something that defines, and I would say even mainly attracts players in such a genre. Just take a look at Skyrim, and if you've played it, think on what exactly makes you reinstall it and boot it up again after so many years. For me, it's the thought of simply running around the world, exploring different locations. Even though I have well over 1,000 hours in the game, it still excites me. Now, why do I bring this up? It's because when it comes to exploration, Origins truly immerses you in the local climate. I don't know about you, but I don't know shit about geography. And I'm not talking on a macro level, right? If you were to show me a blank map of my country and ask me to point to the capital city vague area, my guess would most likely be way off. So when I heard that they were making a game set in Egypt, I thought it was going to be mostly empty deserts and the occasional offshoot of the Nile, but nothing could be further from the truth. To the more educated of you, this may seem obvious, but hey, I mean, that's why I mentioned my lack of geographical knowledge. Now, where am I going with this? The diversity and beauty of Egypt. Yes, you've got plenty of open deserts filled with nothing but the golden sand, but the game also offers a wide variety of towns and villages, ancient ruins and temples, lush oases and stunning greenery by the rivers, and so much more. Hell, some areas like the Green Mountains made me feel like I was playing Odyssey again, and all of it feels lived in. I don't think I've ever stumbled on a treasure chest or an enemy in an area where it didn't belong. You're not going to find a hyena in a pyramid or a hippo wandering the desert. Again, this may seem obvious, but it's a detail that many games frequently overlook. If I'm infiltrating a Roman camp by a river, I know that should I choose to approach from the water, I will have to be on the lookout for crocodiles and hippos and adjust my path accordingly. It wasn't until Origins that I truly felt in awe. The green waters of Egypt hide many sunken ships, caverns and temples, and I don't think there was a single underwater location that I did not thoroughly enjoy exploring. I even made a little game for myself. Every time Bayek would dive anywhere, I would hold my breath to feel just how much time he spends down there. And I know it sounds odd, right? But it's genuinely pretty fun, and you should try it for yourself, within reason, of course. With all of the care the developers put into designing every submerged area, Origins really introduced new depth to the series, literally. And speaking of ancient temples and tombs, God did it feel good to explore them. As I said, I have been fascinated by ancient Egypt since I was a boy, and actually getting to delve beneath the sands was phenomenal. And here, once again, attention to detail was superb. The tombs are of course dark as all shit, so the game introduced the revolutionary concept of a torch to illuminate these areas, and you can light up different braziers and torches scattered around the tombs if you get close enough, which is something I feel not enough games let you do. If you've ever played Dark Souls 2, you will know the wharf area that I forget the name of, with a plethora of braziers to make it a bit lighter, or the spider area with the same or perhaps even a greater amount of torches and braziers that had the added benefit of keeping the spiders away. Again, such a simple concept, and yet the fact that I remember it so many years later speaks volumes about how rarely games actually let you do that. But anyway, that was kind of an off topic, right? The tombs are also covered in thick spider webs that Bayek will actually get caught in if you walk through them. Not stopped in his tracks, thank God, but one of his hands will stick and he will have to yank it away as you walk past. But if you approach any cobweb with a torch, it'll burn away, a feature that was even a minor part of a puzzle in the DLC where you had to cleanse cobwebs from reflective surfaces to shine light on a doorway. It's these little details that really make the world. And speaking of puzzles, the game actually has some minor ones. They are incredibly simple, right? In most cases you just move around some columns, but some include pulley systems that you have to weigh down with blocks to create a stable and climbable platform, or a boat that you have to block to prevent it from flipping to the other side as you climb for a jump. Again, incredibly minor, but it is something that they for some reason gave up in Odyssey in favor of simply moving around bookshelves or whatever, and coming back to Origins after that game, I had fun with these. And what's your reward for exploring all of these tombs and temples, aside from the occasional treasure chests? In most cases, an ancient tablet that will play a little animation of Bayek reading from it and an ability point. Bit of a missed opportunity if you ask me. I mean, how cool would it have been if each tablet had a little text pop-up talking about who's buried there? or some ancient ritual. Even better, you could have Bayek read it, but instead he simply says ancient text from the Old Kingdom or whatever.
Ancient writing from the Old Kingdom.
A few temples will have an Isu artifact at the end that you will have to power up with silica, and when activated it will play a pre-recorded message by the Isu. It's honestly both story-wise and visually such a neat concept, but again, there is one little detail that ruins it for me: Bayek's reaction, or lack thereof. As previously mentioned, he is a deeply religious man, and yet he has no reaction to these shining golden lights and voices appearing out of ancient stones. One explanation for this that I saw is that they are not for Bayek's eyes, they are for Layla, and through Bayek, she is the only one experiencing them. As far as I'm aware, it's not stated anywhere in Origins, but fine, whatever, except at the end of these temples, it always has a teleport pad that will engulf Bayek in a bright light and shoot him back up to the surface. I mean, what, was that also from Layla's eyes? Did Bayek simply close his eyes in some dark underground tomb, and upon opening them up again, see the desert or whatever all around him and just assume that's normal? How often does this happen in his life to not even warrant a grunt or a shrug? This is obviously a nitpick, but it takes away from the character. And while we are on the topic of characters, there are two that I would like to point out that I felt were wasted. You, of course, as usual in Assassin's Creed, get to interact with many historical figures, most notably Cleopatra, who I think was handled fine. But these two were absolutely wasted, starting off with Ptolemy. The game is full of Bayek's angry comments towards the pharaoh. Some objectives on the map require you to destroy his statues. You are constantly hunted by his special police, the Phylakitai, and yet he is nowhere to be seen aside from, what, 2 cutscenes, one of which being a 5-second clip of his death? And the other one is Julius Caesar, and don't even get me started on that one. First, he only appears towards the end of the game for only a couple of missions, which is already irritating, but then the game has the audacity to force me to kill him?
I will not betray Caesar!
Julius Caesar was a great man, his death was a tragedy, and you forcing me to kill him was shameful. Shame on you, Ubisoft. As for a more technical view of the design philosophy behind Origins, it is not difficult to spot what game they were taking notes from, down to the question marks dotting the map, The Witcher 3. And while this has earned the ire of some fans online, I think they did a pretty good job. Yes, the exploration is mostly focused around these question marks, so the argument is that there is little reason to explore anywhere else, but that is simply not true. Unmarked locations still contain treasure chests to find, animals to kill for the crafting materials, enemies to look out for, and breathtaking areas, which feel like a treasure chest in and of themselves, with no quest leading you there. Some might say if there's no quest or treasure in an area then it's pointless, but tell me this. Do people climb mountains because there's money on the top, or do they do it for the experience and the view? Now look, I know this segment has been kind of rambly, and believe me, I could talk and talk for hours, but the main takeaway is this. They crafted a visually stunning world on a massive scale, and yet it does not feel empty. I never felt bored running from one area to another, because the developers took great care in not only making a beautiful world, but also a historically accurate one. Sure, they took some creative liberties here and there, but just go and give the Discovery Tour a try. I will freely admit that I only went in there for Steam achievements, but it was genuinely interesting, and you could tell that the devs were actually passionate about their work, which is such a refreshing feeling in a world of copy-paste slop. If you're at all interested in Egyptian culture, history, agriculture and way of life, you will not be disappointed. Since Origins was already a reinvention of the franchise, it's no surprise that the gear system also received an overhaul, with an entirely new combat system and weapon types. I'll save combat for another segment of the video, but when it comes to weapons, a very minute detail that I already touched on in the Odyssey video is also present here. I cannot use anything other than swords, because everything else magically enlarges and shrinks whenever I sheath or unsheath it. I know I'm pedantic, I know it's minor, but by God I hate it, and every single time I see it I just cringe, which is genuinely a shame because I love spears in general, and in-game I enjoyed having to use the two-handed axe in the arena fights, but something in my brain is always focusing my attention on the weapons magically changing sizes. As for your armor and outfits, I think Ubisoft did a fantastic job. There is a wide plethora of outfits with different colors, and each allows you to freely toggle whether you want the hood or helmet up or not, and while you're at it you can toggle Bayek's hair and beard. The armor has been split into two sections, outfits and, well, armor for lack of a better synonym. The outfits are just your clothes and offer no practical benefits, aside from looking stylish. Bayek's robes have got to be some of my favorite assassin robes in the series, and his hidden one outfit from the DLC is even better. But there is also a bunch of other ones that you can purchase from vendors or earn through quests and challenges. I am happy to say that aside from one set, pretty much everything in the real money store was, at least to me, ugly, and so I never felt like actually getting one. Now as for the armor, that is your bracers, separated into attack damage for one and ranged damage for the other, breastplate, hidden blade, quiver, and tools pouch. The tools pouch and the quiver are pretty simple, they just let you carry more tools, but the other segments each increase their corresponding stat value per upgrade. Pretty par for the course when it comes to RPGs, but a detail I appreciated is that they change their appearance with each upgrade. At the start of the game you'll be looking like your common Egyptian, but by the end I dare say a pharaoh wouldn't scoff at them. To upgrade your gear, you will need a certain amount of crafting materials, as usual. They are mostly pretty easy to get by hunting animals or dismantling the unending supply of random gear you get from treasure chests and enemies, but there is one material that has specifically pissed me off throughout the game: carbon crystals. They are rare and, according to a loading screen tooltip, mostly found in military camps, but in the base game every chest only contains one, which is really annoying when you consider that you need 80-90 pieces to fully upgrade everything? Perhaps even more. I didn't have all of the ones I needed by the time I finished the base game and clearing every single location on the map, and that is after I purchased 20 extra ones from Rita. Fortunately, the first DLC has chests that contain 3 crystals each, so it's easy to catch up. As for the wood, iron and bronze, you can, as I already said, simply dismantle your old gear or raid enemy supply transports that will be highlighted by Senu. Now who is Senu, you might ask? Well, it's your eagle vision, except this time literally. If you've played any previous games in the franchise, you will know how Eagle Vision worked and how it evolved from a simple, mainly useless tool to a powerful ability in stealth, letting you target and mark enemies to make it easier to move around stealthily. Origins introduced the idea of looking through an eagle's eyes and marking enemies, treasures, entrance points from a bird's eye view, and while it is useful and honestly pretty fun to be able to view everything around you from such an elevation, I honestly prefer the Unity or Syndicate style of the ability, and I am glad that with Valhalla and now Shadows they seem to be moving back to that. Origins also offers multiple tools for different situations, but I will reserve my comments for their corresponding sections of the video, as I feel they will tie you in better with them than with a general overlook in this section. And with that, let's move into the first of those. I don't know about you, but I always considered Assassin's Creed to be mostly a stealth franchise, and that is how I choose to play these games, and it's the way that's most satisfying for me. And I have to say, Origins disappointed me. Let's start off with something that I purposefully omitted in the exploration section: enemy camp design. I have to be real, it's pretty damn boring for the most part. Outside of some major forts and a couple camps, it's just a bunch of tents with a bunch of grass scattered around to make up for the lack of usual verticality the series had previously offered. Enemies are either absolutely brain dead or completely busted. All you need to clear a group of 5 enemies is a single bush. Simply sit in it, whistle, and one guard will approach, enabling a takedown that does not break your stealth. Rinse and repeat until they are all dead. Seriously, unless you whistle multiple times, only one enemy will ever be drawn towards you, aside from like 1 or 2 story NPCs. And since you don't break your invisibility mode if you never leave the bush during the animation, you don't have to put any thought into strategically picking off enemies. I hate to say this, but by the end of the base game, I was genuinely bored of stealth and simply going through the motions. Another aspect that further led to my boredom was the lack of kill animations. You get one per situation and you'd best be happy with it. After the creativity the devs put into the animations in Unity and Syndicate, even coming up with double assassinations while accounting for the protagonist only having one blade, I was left disappointed and wanting for more. And speaking of double assassinations, they're gone from the entire quote-unquote RPG trilogy. Sure, you can get an ability to toss a thing. Honestly, I have no idea what it is that Bayek's tossing, but anyway, you can toss it at another enemy in range after a successful assassination, but it's so painfully slow that if the enemy sees you, it will start combat by the time they die. which alerts nearby enemies, and due to its lack of speed, I can't count the number of times enemies have already moved behind cover by the time Bayek was done. If you can't come up with any animations for a double takedown, at least increase the speed of the damn projectile, Ubisoft, because at this point it's much more convenient to shoot the other enemy with a bow before assassinating the first one. And speaking of bows, they're great. They are honestly great. Origins offered 4 different versions: the warrior bow meant for combat, shooting a spread of arrows, the light bow again for combat, shooting weaker arrows in quick succession, the hunter bow, my personal favorite, which functions like your regular bow, and the predator bow, a much more powerful bow with limited arrow capacity, a greater range, and if you have a certain skill, the ability to manually control the arrow. The first 2 are useless in stealth, but the latter were tools I often employed when clearing out enemy camps, and the choice to introduce different types was great. Aside from your blade and your bow, you've got a couple different darts, berserk ones, which I never used, fire bombs, which I never used, and sleep darts, which I seldom used. The sleep darts are honestly great, it's just that with how easy stealth is, I kept forgetting I had them. But still, they deserve a mention because they are a great tool. Wish I could say the same about smoke bombs. Yes, smoke bombs. I bet some of you didn't even know they were in the game. You can't manually aim where you want them to land, and instead you're forced to drop them at your feet after a dodge. They may be useful in combat, but come on Ubisoft, how difficult would it have been to give me the option to toss it in a crowd of enemies to enable multiple quick takedowns, or at least as quick as Bayek's animations allow. In conclusion, stealth was fun at the beginning, but honestly I think that's only because I played the game after Odyssey, and actually having a hidden blade again felt like Christmas. If you were playing the games in order, you were suddenly deprived of the wide plethora of great animations from the previous 2 titles and back into the older days of Assassin's Creed. Now you might notice that I didn't talk about the perhaps most controversial change of Origins. The fact that assassinations are no longer instant kills. That's because, while at times annoying when you couldn't sneak into higher level areas, Origins handled that mostly fine, which only further baffles my mind at how much Odyssey fumbled. If you keep your hidden blade upgraded semi-consistently, you will have no issues. There are very few enemies in the game that can't be insta-killed by a stealth takedown, and the vast majority of them are story related, with the exception of a certain type of fort commander, which I've only seen like 5 times throughout the entire game. Once again, it's not hard to notice that Ubisoft again looked at The Witcher 3 for inspiration when redesigning their combat. After their, in my opinion, failed attempts at modernizing their combat in both Unity and Syndicate, they finally landed on something that I thought was fine. Don't get me wrong, it's nowhere near as snappy and good as The Witcher 3, but then again, very few games are. As previously mentioned, I didn't use most of the weapon types due to a personal annoyance, and avoided daggers because I didn't like the short reach. But both the straight and sickle swords were fine. Nice animations and great visual design all around. However, I found myself using mostly straight swords, because their overpower ability is simply superior to that of the sickle sword, letting you take out 2 annoying enemies in quick succession. Now what's that? Annoying enemies? That's right. Out of the 5 common soldier types in the game, I absolutely hate 3 of them. The Brute, the Assassin guys, and the Captains. The Brutes randomly shrug off your attacks and suddenly decide that hit stun is a thing of the past. The Assassin guys will dodge any and all attacks you toss at them unless it's right after their attack, and the Captains will block or parry everything. The answer to that is dodging their attacks, but the dodge somehow doesn't track properly even when locked on, and I end up way too far to land a follow-up attack, leading to further frustration after already having to wait to react rather than act. In addition, combat feels clunky and floaty, but maybe that's a personal thing. One aspect that I found difficult to adjust to coming back from Odyssey was the parries. Blocking, I never really used anyway, but in Odyssey parrying was pretty damn easy and incredibly satisfying to pull off, but in Origins I just can't get the hang of it. Call it a skill issue if you want, but it's more similar to Dark Souls 1 parries, which I could never quite get the hang of, so like in that game I had to resort to being good at dodging. The problem is that while Dark Souls makes sure the vast majority of enemies' attacks are clearly telegraphed, I found Origins to be a bit more on the unpredictable side, with sudden jerks rather than calculated swings. Again, maybe it's a skill issue, I don't know. Fortunately, however, enemies are not damaged sponges, unlike in Odyssey, And I'm really sorry for trashing Odyssey so much, you guys know I love the game, but I call him like I see him. Even with the annoying enemies, a good weapon appropriate for your level, combined with the overpower abilities and some bow usage here and there, will make quick work of any fight that isn't a boss fight. And the boss fights are mostly fine, with the exception of Pharaoh fights in the DLC, which I felt dragged on a bit too long, even with fully upgraded gear at max level. As you could imagine from a game titled Origins, it delves into the origins of many of the aspects that have permeated the franchise for almost 2 decades. I don't want to spend too long talking about them, but I felt a short section to appreciate them was warranted. The cutting of the finger stemming from Bayek and Aya's mistake in putting the hidden blade on the wrong side of the arm was honestly pretty funny, but I really appreciated that it wasn't just left at that. As the Order of the Hidden Ones, whose name stems from the Egyptian god Amun, the Hidden One, which I felt was an unnecessary but much appreciated tie-in, started growing, other members started cutting off their ring finger to show their devotion. They knew it wasn't something Bayek had done on purpose, but it showed their willingness to sacrifice for the cause, just as Bayek had sacrificed his finger to kill Eudoros. And speaking of the initiation process, the Hidden Ones DLC also showed that Bayek adopted his own family's tradition into his new family, the Leap of Faith. Originally used by his father and presumably grandfather before him to teach their children to let go of fear by quite literally letting go and believing that they will fall safely. Hell, they even came up with a believable way to explain the now iconic assassin logo by showing that it was an imprint of an eagle's skull Bayek dropped on the sand after his quest for revenge was over. And that probably also led to the eagle iconography when it comes to the peaked hoods that the Hidden Ones would come to wear. One thing that I only picked up on my second playthrough was the feather, mostly because I don't remember it being used aside from Assassin's Creed 1, but even here Ubisoft came up with a wonderful tie-in with Egyptian mythology by having Bayek swipe his main targets with a feather at the end of each memory corridor. At first I didn't pay much attention to it, but then it suddenly clicked when I remembered that in Egyptian mythology when you died, your heart would be weighed against a feather to determine whether you've lived a good life. Did any of these things need explanations? No. For all of these years I had absolutely no issue with developers making stuff up as they went with the sole purpose of looking cool. But was it really nice to actually have an in-universe explanation that made sense? Yeah, it was great. And now that we've covered the Hidden Ones, let's move on to the newly created Proto-Templars, the Order of the Ancients. I don't have many problems with them, and I thought that they were handled mostly pretty damn well. They couldn't have used actual Templars centuries before their creation, but since they were always fascinated by and sought to control Isu technology, a semi-religious order with mostly the same views of control and power was handled well in Origins. Each main target featured a memory corridor after a kill, and the conversations held there were mostly interesting with regards to their goals, personalities and ideology, although I will say that some of them were a little over the top visually.
You die easily for a god!
I am nobody. Nobody. But when the son of Ra stands on the mountain and says, "Do it!" it gets done.
An invention of Origins that is now seemingly here to stay is the whole target menu, with displays of all of your, well, targets throughout the game, and gives you a little bit of lore about them. It's incredibly bare bones, as their identities are tied to story quests and it's not possible to trigger a reveal or a kill at any other point than after getting to that particular part of the story. But looking back at it through the lens of subsequent games, it was one of my favorite additions from the RPG age of Assassin's Creed, as it evolved to be a genuinely fun system in Odyssey and Valhalla. Now, since I've already covered the main points I wanted to touch on, I wanted to leave a section for random thoughts that I couldn't figure out how to implement in the quote-unquote proper segments of the video. The title of this one might be a little clunky, but I'm kind of experimenting here with titles that are more relevant to the setting. I hope at least one person appreciated them. But anyway, here is a collection of disjointed details that I wrote down while replaying the game. Starting off with a term that I very much like, as it makes me sound like a pseudo-intellectual: ludonarrative dissonance. This is once again a very small nitpick, but as you might already be starting to see from my videos, random details sometimes really annoy me. Certain quests in the game will require you to rescue NPCs and carry them out of hostile environments before you can initiate a conversation. And for the most part, these NPCs will whine about how they can't walk due to broken legs, a disease or whatever else. But upon putting them on the ground and initiating a conversation, they magically stand up and are healed, as if Bayek's touch was equivalent to being wrapped in a Shroud of Eden. Normally, I would just play this on the game engine zonking out, but I distinctly remember one conversation in which the NPC actually stayed on the ground, so it's clearly an oversight on the devs' part. And speaking of quest conversations, by god are they boring. It's just Bayek and the NPC doing idle emotes while talking, with actual cutscenes being so rare you can sometimes forget they're even in the game. What is this, an MMO? Even Oblivion offered zoom-ins and some emotes on the character's face. Next up, for a side of positivity, small immersive details. I already talked about a couple, but have you ever noticed that if you leap off too big a height and take damage, Bayek will be slightly slower and limp for a little bit? I know it's incredibly minor, but it's nice that someone actually thought about including that little animation. Similarly with getting in and out of water, as your clothes will be visibly drenched and Bayek will try to shake the water off of him. Oh, and also, if you hold down your sprint button while you're falling, he will execute a roll, and depending on the height you won't take damage that you would have otherwise taken. And you know, speaking of parkour, the zipline animations are terrible. I mean, just look at this. Holding onto the rope with your bare hands. At the end of this rope, if he by some miracle managed to hold on and not let go after 5 seconds, I'm pretty sure his hands would be torn to the bone. As you can probably tell, I love Origins. I really do. But it's not pretend that it's without flaws. These flaws, however, are mostly minor and can be somewhat excused, as this was not only Ubisoft's first attempt at an RPG title in the series, but also because they genuinely learned and improved in the majority of areas. And looking at the increasing amount of footage from Shadows, it appears like they are still trying to improve their game. I know it's popular to hate on Ubisoft right now, and I will not pretend like they didn't deserve it. But I'm sorry, the gameplay previews we got recently genuinely looked good, and I am excited to play it. I think it's truly a shame that Ubisoft decided to seemingly do away with sequels, because Bayek and Aya genuinely deserved one. They were not only precursors to the Assassin Brotherhood, but their stories were not finished. We still don't know why Bayek was completely forgotten, and as for Aya, the epilogue is a perfect setup for a sequel in Rome following Caesar's death. I mean, hell, she even appears in the Hidden Ones DLC talking about her work there, with Bayek noting that he may visit her soon. The epilogue mission had us go to Rome to assassinate Caesar, and the taste of the beautiful architecture left me wanting for more. Let's hope that somewhere down the line, Ubisoft decides to return to Rome. Now, with my rambling complete and all of that being said, if you disagreed with anything in the video, or if I managed to capture your thoughts perfectly, please let me know. I am genuinely interested to hear your opinions. My next project will hopefully be about Valhalla, as after the initial hype, I was incredibly disappointed with the game and didn't even touch any content added after the Siege of Paris, but I would like to give it another chance. Valhalla, however, is a much longer game than either Origins or Odyssey, and I don't know whether I will be able to finish the video by the time Shadows releases, as I only write down basic notes while playing and start work on the script after I 100% the game I'm talking about. So hey, fingers crossed. Anyway, I hope you had fun.